My dad never asked if I was okay. He just said one sentence: "You are withdrawing from Harvard this week." I thought he was joking until I saw the withdrawal email sent from a family account I never created. The moment I said no, I lost my home, my phone number, and access to the room that was once mine. But years later, when they called begging me to save a life, I made a choice that left them absolutely paralyzed. My name is Alina Hartwell, and up until 1900 hours on a Tuesday in late October, I lived under the naive impression that I had escaped. I was sitting in my dorm room at Winthrop House, surrounded by the comforting, musty smell of library books and the low hum of my laptop fan. The heating system in the old building was rattling, a sound that usually annoyed me but tonight felt like a protective barrier against the cold Boston wind whipping against the glass. I was safe here. I was a sophomore at Harvard University. I was 3,000 miles away from the suffocating heat and even more suffocating expectations of Mesa Vista, Arizona. Then my phone vibrated against the wooden desk. It was a video call request. The name flashing on the screen was simply Ray. Not Dad, just Ray. I had changed it in my contacts the day I moved into the dorms freshman year, a small act of rebellion that no one else would ever see. My stomach did that familiar, sickening flip it always did when he called, a physical reflex honed over 19 years of walking on eggshells. I stared at the green button. I considered letting it ring out. I considered pretending I was in the library, or asleep, or literally anywhere else on the planet. But the vibration was persistent, buzzing against the wood like an angry hornet. I accepted the call. Ray Hartwell filled the screen. The connection was grainy, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead and the way his jaw was set, tight and hard. He was sitting in his recliner, the brown leather one with the duct tape on the left armrest. Behind him, the living room wall looked yellowed and tired. He did not say hello. He did not ask how my classes were going. He did not ask if I was eating enough or if I had made friends. "You are coming home," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same flat finality he used when he told me he had sold my bicycle to pay a utility bill when I was 12. I blinked, my fingers hovering over the keyboard of my laptop where I had been typing an essay on bioethics. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet room. "You heard me?" "Alina," he said, "you are withdrawing, just for a semester, maybe 2. You pack your bags this week. I will look at flights tonight." I felt a cold prickle run down the back of my neck. This was new. Usually, the demands were for money, or for me to resolve a dispute with a utility company over the phone because I sounded more educated than him. But this was different. This was structural. "Why?" I asked. I kept my voice steady. I learned a long time ago that emotion was blood in the water for Ray Hartwell. "It is your sister," he said, waving a hand dismissively as if the disaster he was about to describe was merely a weather event, something unavoidable. Tessa failed. She failed everything. Alina, the nursing program at the community college, kicked her out. They said she missed too many classes. They said her grades were irrecoverable. I waited for the part where this became my problem. I knew it was coming. In the Hartwell house, Tessa's failures were never just hers. They were atmospheric disturbances that required everyone else to adjust their altitude. "She is a mess," Ray continued, his voice rising. "She is crying in her room right now. She needs guidance. She needs someone to sit her down and force the work into her head. That is you. You are the smart one. You come home. You get a job at the diner to help with the bills since I am between projects right now. And you tutor Tessa. You get her back into that program next fall. Then you can go back to your fancy school." I stared at him. The absurdity of it was almost impressive. He wanted me to dismantle the life I had clawed my way out of the dirt to build, just to act as a crutch for a sister who had spent her entire high school career mocking me for studying. He wanted me to leave Harvard, a place that had an acceptance rate of under 5%, to go work at a diner in Mesa Vista and tutor a 21-year-old woman who could not be bothered to show up for class. "No," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. On the screen, Ray's face went very still, the vein in his neck, the one that always bulged when he was about to lose control, began to throb. What did you say? He whispered. I said no. I repeated. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that I prayed he could not hear through the microphone. I am not withdrawing. Dad, I am not coming home to tutor Tessa. She is an adult. If she fails, she needs to figure it out. I have midterms next week. I have a scholarship that depends on my GPA. I am not throwing this away. Ray laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Throwing it away. You think you are better than us, don't you? You think because you got into that school, you are suddenly royalty. You forget who put food in your mouth for 18 years. You forget who kept a roof over your head. I did not forget. I remembered every eviction notice. I remembered every night I ate cereal with water because we could not afford milk. I remembered studying by flashlight because the power had been cut. I remembered him taking the money I earned babysitting to buy lottery tickets because he had a feeling about the numbers. I am not doing it, I said, and this time, my voice was harder. It surprised me. It sounded like the voice of a stranger, someone with iron in her spine. I am staying here. Ray leaned forward, his face filling the camera lens, distorting his features into something grotesque. Listen to me, Alina, he snarled. This is not a negotiation. I am your father. I decide what is best for this family. Sacrifice is what we do. I have sacrificed everything for you girls. Now it is your turn. If you do not get on that plane, if you choose that school over your own flesh and blood, then you are done. Do not call me Dad. Do not call your mother. You are dead to us. The threat hung in the air between Boston and Arizona. He expected me to crumble. He expected the little girl who used to cry when he raised his voice to apologize and beg for forgiveness. He expected me to say, I would do anything to remain a Hartwell. But I looked at the man on the screen, really looked at him, and I realized something terrifying. He did not love me. He loved what I could provide. He loved my utility. And right now, my utility as a tutor and a second income source in Mesa Vista outweighed my utility as a trophy daughter at Harvard. Then I guess I am dead to you, I said. I reached out and pressed the red button. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of my dorm room, my hand trembling slightly. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing weight of guilt that usually followed any confrontation with Ray, but it did not come. Instead, there was only a cold, vibrating clarity. I had done it. I had said no. And then, my laptop pinged. It was the standard notification sound for a new email. I almost ignored it. I wanted to close my computer, crawl into bed, and sleep for 12 hours. But something about the timing, coming exactly 30 seconds after the call ended, made my skin crawl. I clicked on the mail icon. The email was at the top of my inbox. The sender was the Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences Registrar's Office. The subject line read, Confirmation of Leave of Absence Request. The air left my lungs. I opened the email, my vision blurring at the edges. Dear Alina Hartwell, this email is to acknowledge receipt of your request for a voluntary leave of absence for personal family reasons. Effective immediately. We have received the digital form submitted through the Family Emergency Portal. Your withdrawal from current courses will be processed within 24 hours. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I did not send this. I had not submitted anything. I clicked on the details of the submission. The request had been sent 5 minutes ago, right in the middle of our phone call. It had been sent from an email address I recognized, but had not seen in years. Hartwell Family Connect. It was a shared account Ray had set up when I was a freshman in high school, insisting that we needed a central hub for digital bills and emergency contacts. He had demanded my passwords back then, claiming it was for my safety, for parental oversight. I thought I had changed them all when I turned 18. I thought I had scrubbed that part of my digital life clean. But I had missed something. There was a back-end link, a recovery email option, something deep in the university's emergency contact settings that I had overlooked. Ray had not called to ask me to come home. He had called to distract me while he forced me home. He knew I would say no. He knew I would fight him. So he had taken the choice away before he even dialed my number. He had logged in, impersonated me, and nuked my academic standing while looking me in the eye and lecturing me about responsibility. I stared at the timestamp on the email. It was sent at 1912. Exactly when he was telling me that Tessa was crying in her room, he wasn't just gaslighting me, he was actively executing a demolition order on my future. If I did not fix this, the university bureaucracy would grind into motion. My housing would be revoked. My scholarship funds would be frozen. My student ID would stop working. By the time I explained it was a mistake, the semester would be compromised. And if I went home to fix it, if I went back to Mesa Vista to argue with him, I would never get out again. That was the trap. He needed me physically there. Once I was under his roof, without resources, without the shield of the university, I would be just another Hartwell girl, trapped in the gravity well of his failures. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call him back and scream until my throat bled. But then I looked at the email again. Family emergency portal. He had checked a box that said, medical/family crisis. He had forged a digital signature. I took a breath, a long, shaky breath that rattled in my chest. I did not close the laptop. I did not call him back. I did not cry. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Evidence. I took a screenshot of the email. I took a screenshot of the call log showing the duration of our video chat. I logged into the student portal and navigated to the access logs, finding the IP address that had submitted the request. It would trace back to a residential connection in Mesa Vista, Arizona, not Boston. This was not just a controlling father. This was a fraud. This was identity theft. This was a criminal act committed by a man who claimed he was doing it for love. I picked up my phone. I saw a text message from Tessa. It arrived 2 minutes ago. Dad is really mad. Just come home. Ali, don't make this hard for everyone. It's just school. It's just school. To them, Harvard was just a fancy name tag. To me, it was oxygen. I did not reply to Tessa. I did not block Ray. Not yet. I needed them to think they had won. Just for a few more hours. I needed them to think I was packing my bags. Crying. Defeated. I opened the contact information for the dean of students. It was almost 10 at night. I did not care. I began to type. Subject urgent. Unauthorized access and fraudulent withdrawal request. Alina Hartwell. My fingers flew across the keys. I was not writing as a daughter anymore. I was writing as a victim of a calculated attack. I stripped the emotion out of the sentences. I stuck to the facts, the times, the IP mismatch, the lack of consent. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of my dorm room. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked terrified. But beneath the terror, there was something else, a cold, hard knot forming in the center of my stomach. Ray Hartwell had made a mistake. He thought he was breaking a 19-year-old girl who was afraid of the dark. He forgot that he was the one who taught me to be afraid of the dark, and because of that, I learned to see in it. He wanted a war. He wanted to use paper and bureaucracy to destroy me. Fine. I hit send on the email to the dean. You want me to learn a lesson about family. Ray. I whispered to the empty room. I'm going to teach you one instead. I sat back in my chair and watched the wind batter the glass. I was not going back to Arizona. I was not going to save Tessa. And I was absolutely, certainly, never calling him Dad again. The email notification on my screen blinked one last time before the screensaver came on, plunging the room into shadow. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time in my life, I was not holding a shield. I was reaching for a sword. To understand why the threat of withdrawal paralyzed me, you have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. I do not mean the physical structure, though that was telling enough. It was a single-story stucco rental on the edge of Mesa Vista, where the desert dust coated the windowsills within an hour of cleaning them, and the swamp cooler rattled on the roof like a dying engine. The walls were so thin that privacy was a theoretical concept. If you sneezed in the bathroom, someone in the kitchen would say, "Bless you." If my parents were whispering about money in their bedroom, I could hear the exact cadence of their panic from my mattress on the floor of the room I shared with Tessa. But the real architecture was invisible. It was built on a foundation of debt. I am not just talking about credit cards or past due notices from the electric company, although those were as common as junk mail. I am talking about emotional debt. In the Hartwell house, nothing was free. Not dinner, not a ride to school, and certainly not affection. Every interaction was a transaction. If you received love, you incurred an obligation to pay it back with interest. My mother, Dana, was the accountant of this misery, though she never realized it. She worked as a shift manager at a big-box home goods store, the kind that smelled of synthetic cinnamon pine cones and cheap potpourri. She spent 10 hours a day on her feet, dealing with customers returning used towels and sheets that had been washed wrong. She would come home with her ankles swollen over the tops of her sensible shoes, her face gray with exhaustion, and she would recite her mantra. "Everything is going to be fine," she would say, usually while staring into the open refrigerator at a half-empty gallon of milk. "We are just going through a rough patch. It will turn around next month." The rough patch had started in 1995 and had never ended. She used optimism like a drug. It was her way of numbing the reality of Ray. My father. Ray did not have a job. He had projects. He had schemes. He had moments of brilliance that inevitably crashed into the wall of his own ego. He was a certified HVAC technician, and in Arizona, that should have been a license to print money. But Ray could not work for a boss because he knew better than them, and he could not run his own business because he treated customers like they were inconveniencing him by having broken air conditioners. So he pivoted. One month he was going to flip used cars. He bought a sedan with a blown transmission that sat in our driveway for 2 years, leaking oil onto the concrete until the HOA sent us a fine we could not pay. The next month, he was a day trader, staring at scrolling numbers on a clunky desktop computer, explaining to us that he was leveraging assets. We did not have assets. We had a crushing amount of credit card debt and a landlord who only let us stay because Ray fixed the plumbing and the other units for free. And then there was Tessa. If I was the savings account they hoped would mature, Tessa was the slot machine they could not stop playing. She was 2 years older than me, beautiful in a way that made people forgive her for almost anything. She had Ray's charisma and Mom's inability to process consequences. Tessa was always the victim of a conspiracy. She did not fail algebra because she skipped class to hang out at the mall. She failed because the teacher had a vendetta against her. She did not get fired from the receptionist job at the dental clinic because she was rude to patients. She got fired because the other receptionist was jealous of her hair. In any other family, this pattern might have been exhausted by the time she turned 18. In our family, it was fuel. Tessa's disasters gave Ray a purpose. He could swoop in, yell at a principal, threaten a manager, or loan her money we did not have, and feel like a patriarch. He loved the crisis. He loved the rescue. It made him feel powerful, indispensable. I learned very early on that the only way to survive was to be the opposite of Tessa. I became low maintenance. I became invisible. I did not ask for new clothes. I learned to sew patches on my jeans and called it style. I did not ask for ride money. I walked or took the bus. And most importantly, I did not bring home problems. I brought home A+. I thought, naively, that my grades were my ticket to their love. I thought that if I was perfect, if I was the valedictorian, if I never cost them a cent, they would look at me and see a daughter. I was wrong. They did not see their daughter. They saw a lottery ticket. The day the acceptance package from Harvard arrived was the day the illusion finally shattered, though I did not let myself admit it until years later. It was mid-March. The heat was already starting to climb in the valley, the kind of dry heat that cracks your lips. I remember walking home from the mailbox, the thick, heavy envelope clutched to my chest. My hands were shaking. I knew what the weight of the paper meant. A rejection letter is a single, thin sheet. Acceptance is a book. When I walked into the kitchen, Ray was sitting at the table, dissecting a toaster he planned to fix and sell. Tessa was painting her nails on the counter, the smell of acetone warring with the smell of old grease from the stove. I got in. I whispered. Ray looked up. He saw the crimson folder in my hand. He did not smile. He did not jump up and hug me. He leaned back in his chair, wiping grease from his hands onto his jeans, and nodded slowly, as if he had just successfully predicted the weather. "Well," he said, "about time one of my investments paid off." That night, they threw a party. I use the word party loosely. It was just us. A store-bought sheet cake with blue icing that stained your teeth, and a bottle of sparkling apple cider because Ray was on a health kick that week. But Ray made a speech. He stood in the middle of the living room, holding his plastic cup of cider like a chalice. He looked at me, but he was not talking to me. He was talking to the room, to the walls, to the invisible audience he always performed for. "We did it," he announced, his voice booming. "We got Hartwell into the Ivy League. People said we aimed too high. People looked down on us. But I always said, you give a kid the right foundation. You give them the Hartwell work ethic, and they can conquer the world. This is a victory for this family." He talked for 5 minutes about his philosophy of parenting. He talked about the sacrifices he made. He talked about how he pushed me when I wanted to be lazy, which was a lie, because I was the one up at 3 a.m. studying while he snored in front of the television. He never once said congratulations, Alina. He never said, "You worked hard." Alina. It was our victory. My intellect was not my own. It was a genetic dividend he was finally cashing in. I sat there, forcing a smile, feeling a cold stone settle in my stomach. I looked at Mom. She was beaming, her eyes wet, nodding along with him. She believed it. She believed that their chaotic, fearful home was the incubator for my success, rather than the fire I was running from. Then Tessa leaned over. She was picking at the frosting on her piece of cake, looking bored. She had been quiet during the speech, her eyes flicking between me and Ray with a mix of annoyance and calculation. She nudged my arm with her elbow. "Hey, Harvard," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. I looked at her. "Don't forget who got you there," she said, flashing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "And when you get that big doctor-lawyer salary, don't forget to pay the electric bill. Ours is past due again." The room went silent for a second. Ray laughed. It was a loud, booming laugh. "That is right," he shouted. "That is the deal. We launch you. You send the supply drop back down. That is how a family works. Circle of life. Alina, circle of cash flow." He winked at me. He thought it was a joke, or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just saying the quiet part out loud. I looked down at my cake. The blue icing looked like chemicals. In that moment, the joy of the acceptance letter evaporated. The pride I felt in myself was replaced by a sickening realization. They were not celebrating my future. They were celebrating their retirement plan. They were celebrating the fact that the beast of burden they had raised was finally strong enough to carry the cart. Harvard was not just a school. It was not just a collection of old buildings and smart people in Massachusetts. It was the only place on earth where I could be Alina Hartwell, the student, the scholar, the person. Not Alina Hartwell, the safety net. Not Alina Hartwell, the investment property. If I stayed in Mesa Vista, I would drown. I would be sucked into the vortex of Ray's schemes and Tessa's dramas until there was nothing left of me but a husk. I would end up like Mom, standing in a kitchen with swollen feet, telling myself everything was fine while the lights flickered out. I looked at Ray, laughing at his own joke about my future salary. I looked at Tessa, already calculating what percentage of my life she could claim, and I knew, with absolute, crystalline certainty, that I had to leave, not just for 4 years, but forever. That was why. When the email came 2 years later, when the threat to drag me back hung over me like a guillotine, it wasn't just fear I felt. It was a survival instinct. I was not fighting for a degree. I was fighting for my life, because I knew exactly what was waiting for me in that house on Palo Verde Drive, and I knew that if I went back, even for a semester, the walls would close in, and I would never, ever get out again. The silence that followed my email to the dean was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine diving too deep. I sat in my dorm room, staring at the digital clock on my bedside table as it clicked from 11:59 to midnight. Technically, it was a new day, but the nightmare of the previous evening was still clinging to me like wet clothes. I could not sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Ray. I replayed it not to hurt myself, but to dissect it. I was looking for the glitch in the matrix. I was looking for the seam where the lie was stitched to the truth. Ray Hartwell was a man of patterns. When things went wrong, he got loud. When Tessa failed a test in high school, he would spend 40 minutes screaming about the incompetence of the public education system. He would name names. He would threaten to go down to the school board. He was specific in his rage because specificity made him feel like he was doing something. But on the call, he had been vague. She failed at everything. That was what he had said. No specific subject. No name of a professor who had it out for her. No rant about how the nursing program was a scam. Just a blanket statement of failure. It was too clean. It was too sweeping. It lacked the granular texture of Ray's usual grievances. Why was he holding back? Ray never held back ammunition unless he was saving it for a bigger gun. I needed eyes on the ground. I could not ask Mom. She would just repeat whatever script Ray had fed her, adding her own layer of anxious optimism. I certainly could not ask Tessa. I scrolled through my phone contacts until I found a name I had not thought about in 6 months. Mrs. Higgins. She lived 2 doors down from us on Palo Verde Drive. She was 70 years old, spent her days watering her cactus garden, and knew exactly what time every person on the block took out their trash. She had a soft spot for me because I used to bring her mail inside when she had her hip surgery. I sent a text. It was late in Arizona, around 9 at night. But I knew Mrs. Higgins was a night owl who watched crime procedurals until the news came on. "Hi, Mrs. Higgins. It's Alina. Hope you are well. Just checking in. Is everything okay over at my parents' house?" Dad sounded stressed on the phone. The response came 3 minutes later. "Alina, so good to hear from you. Honey, it has been a circus. I saw a tow truck there last week, but it didn't take a car. I just sat there for an hour, and lots of people come and go. Young people, dressed flashy." I frowned. A tow truck that did not tow anything flashy young people. That did not sound like a nursing school study group. "Is Tessa okay?" I typed. Dad said she was having trouble with school. Mrs. Higgins was typing for a long time. Then the message bubble stopped, then started again. "School, honey. I saw Tessa outside yesterday afternoon. She was on her phone, pacing the driveway. She was yelling about down lines and Tier 2 investments. She didn't look like a student. She looked like a salesman. And she was driving a car I have never seen before. A white convertible. Is that yours?" My blood ran cold. A white convertible. Tessa had been driving a beaten-up sedan with a taped bumper since high school. We did not have convertible money. We barely had sedan money. "No," I replied. "That is not mine." I put the phone down. The puzzle pieces were starting to click together, and the picture they formed was ugly. Down lines, Tier 2 investments. Those were not nursing terms. Those were the vocabulary of a pyramid scheme, or as they like to be called now, multi-level marketing opportunities, or high-yield crypto circles. Tessa hadn't just failed out of school. She had dropped out to get rich quickly. And knowing Tessa, she hadn't just invested her own money, she didn't have any. She had invested money she borrowed. I opened my laptop again. I needed to talk to my mother. I needed to hear the lie directly to understand the shape of the truth. I called the landline. I knew Ray would be in the garage tinkering or watching television, and Mom usually picked up the kitchen phone. It rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was thick, heavy with sleep or exhaustion. "Hello, Mom. It's me," I said. "Alina." There was a pause, a rustling sound, like she was switching the phone to the other ear or checking to see if anyone was listening. "You shouldn't be calling this late. Your father he is very upset." "Alina, I know. Mom, I am sorry. I just wanted to ask you something. We can't talk about the withdrawal," she said quickly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He said if you call, I am supposed to tell you to just get on the plane. He says you are being stubborn. I am not talking about the withdrawal." I lied. I am worried about money. "Mom, if I come home, that is another mouth to feed. Can you guys really afford that?" It was a trap question. Usually, this was where she would sigh and complain about the grocery bill. Instead, she hesitated. "It will be fine," she said. But the tone was off. It sounded rehearsed. "Actually, if you come home, things might get easier, a lot easier." Why, I asked. Why would me quitting Harvard make your finances easier? "Because," she trailed off, "because we are a family. Families help each other. And your father has a plan. He has a really big opportunity. Alina, he needs everyone on board. It is a venue, I repeated. Yes, a music lounge, in the old district. He has been talking to some partners. It is going to be high-end, classy, not like the jobs he used to have. This is ownership. Alina, this is a legacy." I felt a wave of nausea. Ray Hartwell, a man who could not keep a checking account in the positive for 3 months straight, was planning to open a high-end music lounge, in commercial real estate terms. That required a down payment of tens of thousands of dollars, a line of credit, permits, liquor licenses. It required capital. "Where is the money coming from?" "Mom," I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Oh, the partners," she said vaguely. "And, well, financing. Dad says we have great leverage now. He says our portfolio looks good. We don't have a portfolio. Mom, we have a rental house and a car with an oil leak. Don't be negative," she snapped, a flash of Ray's anger coming through her. "You always doubt him. That is why he needs you here, to help manage it. You are the smart one. You could be the, what did he call it? The operational manager." I closed my eyes. It wasn't just about tutoring Tessa. It was about using me. But how I was a 19-year-old student, I had no credit history, no assets. Wait, a cold thought struck me. I did have a history. "Mom, I have to go." I said, "Alina." Wait, I hung up. My hands were trembling again. I navigated to the website of our local bank in Mesa Vista. When I was 16, Ray had opened a joint savings account for me. He called it the college fund, though he never put a dime in it. It was where I deposited my babysitting money and my wages from my summer job at the library. When I turned 18, I had transferred most of my money to a new account in Boston, one he couldn't touch, but I had never formally closed the old one. It had a balance of maybe $5. I tried to log in. Password incorrect. I stared at the screen. I had not changed that password. It was a variation of my childhood dog's name and the year I was born. It should have worked. I clicked Forgot Password. I answered the security questions, my mother's maiden name, the name of my elementary school. Reset link sent to r.leemail.com. That was Ray's email. He had locked me out. I sat back, thinking fast. Why lock me out of an account with $5 in it, unless it didn't have $5 in it anymore, or unless it was being used for something else? I remembered something from a finance class I took as an elective freshman year. A joint account holder has full access. If the account is active, it can be used as a verified anchor point. It can be used to show banking history when applying for other things. I needed to see that statement. I called the bank's 24-hour automated service. I punched in my social security number. The robotic voice asked for my PIN. I prayed he hadn't changed that too. I entered the 4 digits. Access granted. Please say balance, recent transactions, or transfer. Recent transactions. I said, most recent transaction deposit, yesterday, in the amount of $12,000. I nearly dropped the phone. $12,000. Next transaction. Withdrawal. Today. In the amount of $4,000. Next transaction withdrawal. Today. In the amount of $2,500. Where did $12,000 come from? And where was it going? I hung up and stared at the wall. The white convertible, the partners, the portfolio. They were washing money, or borrowing it. And then the realization hit me like a physical blow. The reason Ray needed me home wasn't to tutor Tessa. It wasn't even to manage his imaginary nightclub. He needed me home because he was using my name. Harvard wasn't just a brag at a dinner party anymore. To a lender, to a predatory loan shark, or to a business partner. A Harvard student is a prime borrower. I had what Ray and Tessa didn't: a clean slate and the implied promise of high future earnings. If I was in Boston, it would be hard to control. I could deny charges. I could intercept mail. But if I was in Mesa Vista, if I was living under his roof, he could intercept the mail. He could stand over my shoulder while I signed documents. He could bully me into helping the family by co-signing a loan for the business that was going to save us all. He didn't want me to quit Harvard because he hated it. He wanted me to quit so I could be physically present to mortgage the prestige of Harvard to fund his delusions. The failure of Tessa was the catalyst. She had likely gotten into debt with this investment group, and now they needed a way out. I was on the way out. I was the fresh credit card to pay off the maxed out one. I felt sick, a deep, hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with grief. I realized I had been holding on to a tiny secret hope that maybe, just maybe, Ray wanted me home because he missed me, that somewhere deep down, he was a father who just didn't know how to show love. But this wasn't love. This was harvesting. I was a crop to be reaped. I looked at my laptop screen. The evidence folder I had created was empty of the one thing that mattered most: proof of intent. I had the withdrawal email, but I needed to prove they were leveraging my identity. I opened a credit monitoring site. I tried to create an account to check my credit report. I typed in my name, my social security number, my date of birth. I hit submit. A red box appeared at the top of the screen. Error. An account with this social security number already exists. Please log in. I froze. I had never created a credit monitoring account. I tried the forgot password option again. Verification code sent to 8821. That was not my phone number. That was not Mom's number. That was Ray's number. He had already claimed my identity. He had set up the perimeter. He was watching my credit score, likely waiting for it to be high enough to strike. Or perhaps he had already struck. I sat in the dark, the wind outside howling against the brick of the dormitory. I felt small. I felt incredibly young, but mostly, I felt a cold, sharp anger hardening my bones. He thought he was smart. He thought he had checked me by cutting off my support and seizing my digital identity. He thought I was just a student, a girl who read books and followed rules. He forgot what I studied. I was majoring in economics with a minor in psychology. I understood markets, and I understood behavior. Ray was running a Ponzi scheme with human lives, and he had just tried to recruit the one person who knew how to do the math. My phone buzzed on the desk, a push notification from my email app. Security alert. Google account recovery phone number changed. I picked it up. The change happened 1 minute ago. He was awake. He knew I was poking around. He was systematically locking the doors to my own life, one by one. I didn't panic. Panic is what he wanted. Panic makes you run home to safety. Instead, I opened a new browser window, one in incognito mode. I wasn't going to try to recover the accounts yet. That would warn him. I was going to let him think he had locked me out. I was going to let him think the trap had worked, because if you want to catch a thief, you don't scream when you see him picking the lock. You wait until he's inside, until his fingerprints are on everything, and then you close the door from the outside. I looked at the picture of my family I kept on my desk. Mom, looking tired. Tessa, posing like a star. Ray, with his hand on my shoulder, looked like he owned me. I turned the frame face down. Game on. Ray, I whispered, but we are not playing by your rules anymore. We are playing by mine. And in my house, the house of Harvard. We checked the footnotes. I reached for my textbook on contract law. I had a lot of reading to do before morning. The next morning, I was not in a lecture hall. I was in the basement of the Widener Library, a place that smelled of dust and binding glue, working my shift at the student help desk. It was usually a quiet job, resetting passwords for panicked freshmen or helping professors locate digitized archives. But today, my workstation felt less like a help desk and more like a command center. I had 3 windows open on my screen. One was the library's catalog system, which I was supposed to be monitoring. The second was the project dashboard for the digital health initiative I had joined 2 months ago, a research group analyzing user interface data for telemedicine apps. It was the kind of work Ray would call playing on the computer, but it paid $15 an hour and gave me access to high-level data security protocols. The third window was my own life, or what was left of it, laid out in digital code. I was watching the login logs for the university's parent portal. Most students did not know this, but Harvard, like many institutions, had a back-end system where designated family members could view tuition bills and tax documents. I had granted Ray access freshman year because he insisted he needed it to file his taxes to claim me as a dependent. I had forgotten to revoke it. At 10:14 in the morning, a red flag blinked on my dashboard. Active session, parent, guardian portal, IP address, Mesa Vista, Arizona. He was in. I clicked into the session details, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could see exactly what he was looking at. He wasn't looking at the tuition bill. He was in the Documents and Forms section. He was uploading a file. I intercepted the packet before the system could fully process it. It was a PDF titled Hartwell Medical Sup PDF. I opened it. I expected a forged doctor's note. I expected a fake bank statement. But what I read made the air in the basement feel suddenly thin. Like all the oxygen had been sucked out by the ventilation system. It was a letter. A personal statement written in my voice, addressed to the administrative board. To the board. It began. I am writing to formally request an immediate leave of absence due to a severe and acute mental health crisis. Over the past 3 months, I have been struggling with debilitating anxiety and depression that has rendered me unable to care for myself or attend classes. My family in Arizona has arranged for inpatient treatment. It is imperative for my safety that I return home immediately. I sat there, frozen. He wasn't just saying I needed to come home to help the family. That would be an administrative withdrawal, which was hard to process. He was painting me as mentally unstable. He was putting a permanent mark on my medical record that said I was unable to care for myself. If this letter went into my permanent file, getting readmitted would be a nightmare. I would have to prove my sanity to a board of strangers. I would have to get doctors to sign off that I was fit to study. He was not just pulling me out of school. He was salting the earth so nothing could grow back. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was drafted by a man who had barely graduated high school but had a PhD in manipulation. I did not scream. I did not cry. The tech thriller part of my brain, the part honed by coding classes and logic puzzles, took over. I had administrative privileges on my own student account. He had parent access, which was secondary. I opened the Permissions tab. User Ray Hartwell. Access level read, write. I clicked Edit. I changed the setting to Revoke Access. I hit Save. On the screen, the active session indicator spun for a second, then went dead. Connection terminated. I wasn't done. I knew Ray. He had my passwords. He had my social security number. He would just log back in as me. I navigated to the university's security settings. I found the multi-factor authentication tab. Currently, it was set to send a 6-digit code to my phone number or his. If he had successfully swapped it in the carrier system last night, I deleted the phone number option entirely. I pulled up the Authenticator app on my own smartphone, the one I had bought with my own money and kept hidden from the family plan details. I scanned the QR code on the screen. Sync complete. From this second forward, the only way to log into my Harvard account was to have the physical device in my hand. He could guess my password 1,000 times. He could call the help desk and scream. Without my phone, he was locked out. I sat back in the ergonomic chair, my hands trembling slightly. I had just won the skirmish, but I knew the retaliation was coming. It took exactly 3 minutes. My cell phone buzzed. It was Ray. I stared at the screen. I could ignore it. I could let it go to voicemail. But if I didn't answer, he would call the university main line. He would call the police and request a wellness check, claiming his unstable daughter was missing. He would escalate. I needed to contain him. I swiped green. Alina. His voice was warm. It was disturbing. It was the voice he used when he was trying to sell a used car to a grandmother. I was just trying to help you with some paperwork. Honey, and the system kicked me out. I think there is a glitch. There is no glitch. Dad, I said. I was standing in the narrow aisle between the server racks in the back room now, keeping my voice low. I revoked your access. There was a pause, a long, staticky silence where I could hear the hum of the Arizona wind in the background. Why would you do that? He asked, sounding genuinely hurt. I am trying to fix this for us. I am trying to make the transition smooth. There is no transition. I said, I am not withdrawing, and you are not going to file false medical documents claiming I am crazy. That is fraud. Dad, that is a crime. Ray sighed, a sound of deep, paternal disappointment. You are making this so dramatic. Alina, look, I talked to your mother. We looked at the numbers. It is just 6 months, maybe 8. Harvard is not going to run away. It is a bunch of brick buildings. They will be there next year. But your family. We need you now. I felt the anger rising, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed to be logical. I needed to speak the language of facts, even if he was speaking the language of feelings. It is not just buildings. I said, I have a scholarship. Dad, the need-based grant covers 90% of my tuition. If I withdraw without a valid medical reason, a real one, not the fake one you wrote, I lose that funding. If I leave, I will lose my housing. I have nowhere to live in Boston if I come back. I have a lease. I have a job. That is just lawyer talk, he snapped. The sweetness vanished instantly, replaced by the jagged edge I knew so well. You sound like a damn lawyer. Stop calculating and start feeling something. You are my daughter. You are not a contract. I am a person, I hissed, forgetting to keep my voice down. A student turned her head to look at me through the glass partition. I turned my back. I am a person with a future, and you are trying to burn it to pay for Tessa's mistakes. Do not bring your sister into this, he warned. You brought her into this. You told me I had to tutor her. I am done discussing this, Ray said. His voice dropped an octave. It became very quiet, very precise. I gave you a choice last night. You chose the hard way. You think you are a big shot because you changed a password. You think you are independent. I am independent. I said, okay, he said. Let's see. He hung up. I stared at the phone. The call lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I immediately opened the voice memo app. I recorded a summary of the call while it was fresh in my mind. Date October 24th. Time 10:22 a.m. Ray Hartwell admitted to attempting to file paperwork on my behalf. He threatened consequences for revoking his access. I saved the file to a cloud drive that was not connected to my primary email. I named it RH Threat 02. I went back to my desk. I tried to focus on the user interface data for the health project. I tried to care about pixel placement and button responsiveness, but my stomach was twisting in knots. What was he going to do? I didn't have to wait long to find out. At 10:45, my phone buzzed again, but it wasn't a call. It was a text message from the carrier. The national provider that serviced the family plan, Ray, had kept us all on since middle school. System message. The line associated with this device has been suspended by the primary account holder. Service will be deactivated immediately. I stared at the bars in the top right corner of my screen. 5 bars, 4 bars, 1 bar, then no service. He had cut my phone. A second later, a notification popped up on my laptop screen, my email, from State Farm Insurance. Subject notice of policy cancellation. Dear policyholder, this email is to confirm that Alina Hartwell has been removed from the multi-car and health rider policy, effective today, per the request of Ray Hartwell. He was scrubbing me out. He wasn't just cutting me off financially. He was erasing my safety net. No phone to call for help. No car insurance if I drove. No health coverage if I got sick. He wanted me to be vulnerable. He wanted me to be terrified. He wanted me to realize that without the name Hartwell, I was nobody. I looked around the library. Students were walking by with coffees, worrying about midterms, complaining about essays. They looked so safe. They had parents who sent care packages, not eviction notices. I felt a tear prick the corner of my eye. hot and sudden. I wiped it away furiously. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to run to a payphone if those even existed anymore and call him collect, crying, begging to be let back in, begging to be his daughter again. I took a deep breath. The air in the library smelled of old paper and dust, dry and real. I connected my phone to the library Wi-Fi. It still worked as a device, even if it couldn't make calls. I opened my banking app, the new one, the one in Boston. I had $340 to my name. It was enough to buy a prepaid SIM card. It was enough to buy ramen for a month. I opened a new document on my laptop. I typed a heading Independence Day. Under it, I listed what I needed to do. 1. Get a new phone number. 2. Contact the financial aid office about independent status override. 3. Secure healthcare university plan. I wasn't going home. I looked at the text message again. Service deactivated. It wasn't the end. It was a liberation. I took a screenshot of the deactivation notice. I dragged it into the evidence folder. You didn't cut me off. Dad, I thought, staring at the dead signal bars. You just set me free. I packed up my laptop. My shift was over. I had errands to run. And for the first time in 19 years, I didn't have to ask anyone for permission. The physical act of being erased from a family does not sound like a door slamming or a glass breaking. It sounds like the soft, digital click of a SIM card tray popping open. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dorm room, holding my useless phone in one hand and a paperclip in the other. I pressed the metal into the pinhole, ejected the plastic chip that Ray Hartwell had paid for since I was 14, and dropped it into the trash can. It was a small piece of plastic, but it carried the weight of 1,000 check-in calls, 1,000,000 demands for grades, and the invisible leash that had always tethered me to Mesa Vista. I replaced it with a prepaid card I had bought at a convenience store in Harvard Square for $30. I had counted the cash out on the counter in crumpled 1s and 5s, money I had made reshelving books. The clerk had looked at me with mild pity, a girl in a Harvard sweatshirt buying the cheapest plan available, but I did not care. When the new network bars appeared in the corner of the screen, I did not feel ashamed. I felt the strange, light-headed vertigo of freefall. I sent a mass text to my roommate, my few friends, and my boss at the library. New number. The old one is dead. Then I opened the messaging app to check the one thread that mattered. The Hartwell family group chat. It was where we shared birthday photos, where Mom posted pictures of her garden, where Ray sent links to conspiracy theories or get-rich-quick articles. The thread was still there, but the text box at the bottom was gone. A single, gray line of text sat across the screen like a tombstone. You have been removed from this conversation. It was surgical. Ray hadn't just stopped paying for my phone. He had excised me from the digital living room. He had made sure that if Mom sent a picture of a sunset, or if Tessa made a joke, I would not see it. I was not just unfunded. I was uninvited. I waited for 2 days for my mother to call the new number. I had emailed it to her work address, the only one Ray didn't monitor. I kept the phone on my desk while I studied. The volume turned all the way up. Every time it buzzed, my heart jumped. But it was just spam calls or notifications from the university app. Finally, on a Thursday morning, an email arrived. From Dana Hartwell. Subject checking in. I opened it, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. I wanted her to say she was sorry. I wanted her to say she was fighting him. I wanted her to say she had sneakingly put $20 in an envelope for me. Alina, she wrote, I got your number. Please understand that your father is doing what he thinks is best. He says you need to learn that choices have consequences. He says if we make it easy for you to defy the family, we are failing as parents. I miss you. Please don't make everything harder than it already is. Just come home when you are ready to apologize. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. The first time with hope, the second with disbelief, and the third with a cold, dull ache that settled deep in my chest. Don't make everything harder. That was Dana Hartwell's philosophy in 5 words. She wasn't asking me to come home because it was right. She was asking me to come home to reduce the friction in her own life. She was willing to sacrifice my future to lower the volume of Ray's voice in her kitchen. I did not reply. I archived the email. That was the moment I realized that silence was not just a lack of noise, it was a boundary. November turned into December. The campus began to empty out. The frantic energy of midterms was replaced by the clatter of suitcases rolling down the hallway. My roommate, Sarah, was packing for a flight to Chicago. She was complaining about having to sleep on an air mattress at her aunt's house. "You are sure you don't want to come?" she asked, pausing with a stack of sweaters in her hand. "My mom literally makes enough stuffing to feed an infantry unit. She wouldn't mind." I smiled, but it felt tight on my face. "I have a lot of work to do." "Sarah, the library is keeping me on for the break to do inventory, and I have that coding project. You are a machine." "Hartwell," she said, shaking her head. "But seriously, if you get lonely, FaceTime me." I nodded. "I will." When the door clicked shut behind her, the silence of the room was absolute. Thanksgiving Day was a study in gray. The dining halls were closed, except for one central location that served a consolidated meal for the international students and the strays like me. I walked across the yard, the wind biting through my coat. The campus looked like a ghost town. I sat at a long table with a tray of food that had been prepared by a committee. The turkey was dry and had perfectly uniform slices. The mashed potatoes had a crust on top. I looked around. There were students speaking Mandarin, students speaking German, students on their phones scrolling through Instagram feeds of their friends' golden brown turkeys and smiling families. I took a picture of my tray. I didn't post it. I just kept it. A reminder. Thanksgiving. Year 19. Total cost $0. Total debt $0. I ate quickly. Then I went back to my room. I did not wallow. I did not let myself cry over the lack of pumpkin pie. I had work to do. I had picked up a freelance gig through a connection in the computer science department. A small dental clinic in Somerville needed a custom appointment scheduling tool because they were too cheap to buy the enterprise software. It was grunt work coding input fields, setting up database parameters, but they were paying me $20 an hour. I spent the holiday coding. The blue light of the monitor was my heart. The rhythm of my typing was my conversation. By midnight, I had finished the beta version. I sent the invoice. $200. It wasn't a fortune. It was groceries for 3 weeks. It was freedom. A week later, the results of the Health Tech Innovation Challenge were announced. I had submitted my proposal for the user interface project back in October, before the world fell apart. I had almost forgotten about it. I was shelving books in the stacks when my phone buzzed. "Congratulations. Your project has been selected for a Tier 3 microgrant. The amount was $500. I leaned against the metal shelf, breathing in the smell of old paper. $500. To the kids in my dorm who wore Canada Goose jackets, that was a weekend trip to New York. To me, it was the difference between buying textbooks for the spring semester and photocopying them from the library reserves. I felt a surge of pride so intense it almost made me dizzy. I had done this. No Ray, no family name, no leverage, just my brain and my hours. I posted about the win on LinkedIn. It was a professional necessity. My advisor had said, "Build your brand." 3 hours later, I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the post. $500. Big money. "You are strong. Alina. You can self-sustain. So go ahead and do it. Don't ask us for a dime." It was Ray. He must have been stalking my public profile. He didn't say "good job." He didn't say "I am proud." He took my success, my survival, and twisted it into a justification for his abandonment. "See, she is fine. I didn't throw her to the wolves. I taught her to hunt. I blocked the number. I didn't need his validation. I was busy building a new structure to hold my life up. I started going to office hours for my economics professor, Dr. Vance. I sat in her office, drinking the cheap tea she offered, and asked questions about market theory that had nothing to do with class. She looked at me not as a charity case, but as a mind to be sharpened. I started having coffee with the head librarian, a woman named Margaret, who had noticed I was working every possible shift. She didn't ask about my family. She just started leaving extra sandwiches from catering events on my desk. This was my net. It wasn't woven from blood or obligation. It was woven from competence and kindness. It was thinner than the one I had lost, but it was stronger because it didn't come with conditions. The semester ended. I got straight A's. I sent my transcript to the scholarship committee to secure my funding for the next year. I paid my phone bill. I paid my share of the utilities to Sarah. I was tired. My eyes had dark circles that the concealer couldn't hide. I had lost 5 pounds because the dining hall diet sometimes meant skipping dinner to work a late shift. But I was standing, on Christmas Eve. The dorm was empty again. I was working on the clinic's software update, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. My phone buzzed. It was almost midnight. I looked at the screen. It was a text from an email address, sent via an SMS gateway, tessa.h@stairmail.com. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to Tessa since the withdrawal attempt. I opened the message. I know you think I'm the villain. Maybe I am. Dad is terrifying right now. He walks around the house like a bomb waiting to go off because the business thing stalled. I miss having you here to take the heat. I don't hate you, Ali. I don't know how to live without someone telling me what to do. Merry Christmas. I read the message in the silence of my room. I don't know how to live without someone telling me what to do. It was the most honest thing Tessa had ever said. I didn't reply. I couldn't save her. Not yet. If I reached back now, they would pull me into the water before I had learned how to tread it myself. I closed the phone and turned back to my code. Merry Christmas. Tessa. I whispered to the empty room. I typed a line of command. Execute. The program ran without errors. It was clean. It was functional. It was mine. The diploma they handed me was heavy. It was wrapped in a leather cylinder with the Harvard crest stamped in gold leaf, a physical object that supposedly justified the 19 years of chaos that preceded it. When I walked across the stage in the blistering sun of Cambridge, listening to the polite applause of strangers, I did not scan the crowd for familiar faces. I knew there were none. My roommate, Sarah, cheered for me from the student section, and Margaret, the head librarian, had sent me a card with a $50 bill inside. That was it. That was my cheering section, and it was enough. For the first time, the silence from Arizona did not feel like a punishment. It felt like a clean room, a sterile environment where infection could not grow. I graduated on time, with honors in economics and a minor in computer science. I did not go to Wall Street. I did not go to Silicon Valley. I stayed in Boston and took a job at Harborkite Health Labs, a mid-sized tech firm tucked away in a brick building in the Seaport District. It was not glamorous. There were no sleeping pods or free kombucha taps. It was a company that built back-end infrastructure for community health centers, the unsexy, glitchy, vital plumbing of the medical world. My life settled into a rhythm that I can only describe as aggressive normalcy. I woke up at 6 in the morning. I went for a run along the Charles River. I went to work. I paid my rent on the 1st of the month. I bought groceries that included fresh vegetables and milk that I did not have to water down. At Harborkite, I was assigned to a project called Connector. It was a simple interface designed to help patients with limited data plans access their test results and schedule appointments without downloading a heavy app. It was built for people like the old me people who lived life counting megabytes and minutes. We rolled it out to 3 clinics in Dorchester and Roxbury. I remember sitting in the back of a clinic one Tuesday, watching an elderly woman use the kiosk I had helped code. She tapped the screen with a trembling finger, and when the confirmation popped up in big green letters, she let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. It worked, she whispered to the nurse. I did not have to wait on hold. That moment gave me a high that no grade at Harvard ever had. It was the feeling of utility. Not the utility Ray Hartwell wanted from me to be a battery he could drain, but the utility of a bridge. I was building things that helped people cross over the gaps that usually swallowed them. But you cannot build a bridge over a canyon without looking down at the drop. 6 months into the job, I was invited to speak on a small podcast called The Equity Dose. It was a niche program, listened to mostly by public health students and policy nerds. The host, a sharp-witted woman named Elena, wanted to talk about the digital divide in healthcare. We were 40 minutes into the recording, sitting in a soundproof booth that smelled of stale coffee. The red light was on. Elena asked me a question that wasn't on the prep sheet. "Alina," she said, leaning into the microphone, "you are very passionate about data privacy and user autonomy. Is there a personal reason for that?" Most developers just care if the code compiles. You care about who holds the keys. I hesitated. The safe answer was to talk about my studies. The safe answer was to cite a statistic about identity theft. But I was tired of being safe. I was tired of carrying the secret like a stone in my pocket. "It is personal," I said. My voice was steady, magnified by the headphones. When I was a sophomore in college, my father used my digital identity to try to force me to withdraw from school. He logged into my student portal. He impersonated me. He tried to end my education because my sister had failed hers, and he needed me home to fix it. Elena stared at me. The recording software spun silently on the monitor. He tried to use the system against me. I continued. He knew that if he controlled the paperwork, he controlled the person. So yes, I care about who holds the keys, because for a lot of people, a password reset isn't an inconvenience. It is an eviction notice. We finished the interview. When it aired 2 weeks later, I didn't expect much. I shared the link on my LinkedIn and moved on. But stories have a way of finding their own gravity. The clip of me talking about the withdrawal attempt was cut into a snippet and shared on a forum for students dealing with financial abuse. Then it jumped to a legal advice group. It didn't go viral in the global sense I wasn't famous, but it rippled. And ripples travel. A week later, I saw a notification that a user from Mesa Vista, Arizona, had viewed my LinkedIn profile 5 times in 1 hour. It wasn't Ray. It was a girl I went to high school with, someone who was still friends with Tessa. They knew. The realization made my skin prickle, but it didn't make me hide. Instead, it made me double down. I bought a domain name, thestudentshield.org. I spent my nights and weekends building it. It was not a revenge site. I didn't mention Ray or Tessa by name. It was a manual. It was the website I wished I had found that night in my dorm room when I was 19. I wrote guides on how to file for a dependency override with financial aid offices. I wrote templates for cease and desist letters to family members committing identity fraud. I created a checklist for securing digital perimeters, changing recovery emails, enabling hardware keys, freezing credit reports. I turned my trauma into a map. If Ray Hartwell was the monster in the maze, I was leaving red string for the next girl to find her way out. But building the map didn't mean I was healed. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Eris. She was a woman with kind eyes and a ruthlessly logical mind. Our sessions were difficult. I spent the first 3 months trying to convince her and myself that I was fine. I had a job. I had money. I was safe. "You are safe," Dr. Eris said one rainy afternoon. "But you are still standing guard. You live your life like you are under siege." "Alina." "I am," I said. "I have to be." We talked a lot about the concept of help in the Hartwell house. Help was a trap. If you accepted help, you owed your soul. If you gave help, you were expected to give until you were empty. I have to learn the difference between being a resource and being a resource to be mined. I told her. Dr. Eris nodded. "You are learning that you can offer a hand without offering your neck." While I was building my fortress in Boston, I kept a digital watchtower trained in Arizona. It was a bad habit. I knew. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know where the storm front was. I monitored Tessa's social media from an anonymous account. Her life was a chaotic slideshow of frantic reinvention. For 3 months, she was a wellness entrepreneur. She posted photos of herself holding bottles of expensive juice, captioning them with hashtags about hustle and being your own boss. She looked thin in the photos, her smile too wide, her eyes tight. Then the juice posts stopped. Next came the crypto phase. She was reposting blurry graphics about Tier 2 investments And financial freedom. That lasted 6 weeks. Then, silence. For 4 months, she posted nothing. No selfies, no quotes, just a void. Ray was harder to track. He didn't use social media. But small towns talk, and the internet listens. I had set up Google alerts for his name and the city. One hit came up in a local business registry, Hartwell Concierge Services. I dug into the public filings. It was a business license for a premium errand and transport service. It had been dissolved by the state 6 months later for failure to pay tax levies. Another hit on a consumer complaint board. Beware of a contractor named Ray in Mesa Vista. Took a deposit for AC repair. Never showed up. Phone disconnected. He was flailing. The big project he had tried to drag me home for had clearly imploded. Without my credit to prop him up, without my Harvard salary to leverage, he was sinking back into the grift. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and familiar. If I had gone home, would it be different? No, I told myself, repeating Dr. Aris's words. If I had gone home, we would both be drowning. Now, at least one of us is on the shore. 2 years is 730 days. That is a lot of time to build a life. I had friends now, real ones, people like David, a data analyst at my firm who liked hiking and didn't ask to borrow money. We went to dinner. We talked about politics and movies. He knew I was estranged from my family, and he respected the boundary. I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had escaped the orbit. I was starting to believe that the Hartwell curse of chaos and debt was something that happened to other people, not me. Then came Tuesday in November. It was raining in Boston. A cold, miserable sleet that slapped against the windows of the HarborKite office. I was deep in a code review, wearing my noise-canceling headphones, a mug of tea steaming on my desk, my phone, which sat face up on the desk, lit up. I glanced at it, expecting a 2-factor authentication code or a text from David about lunch. The screen was glowing with an incoming call. The number was not saved in my contacts, but the area code was burned into my brain. 480, Mesa Vista, Arizona. My hand froze over the keyboard. The cursor on my screen blinked steadily. A heartbeat of logic in a moment of sudden, irrational panic. It could be a wrong number. It could be a telemarketer. But my body knew. My stomach dropped. That sensation of freefall returning instantly, erasing 2 years of therapy in a single second. The hairs on my arms stood up. They found me. I watched the phone ring. I watched the name of the city flash on the screen. It felt like a beacon from a shipwreck, signaling that the water was rising again. I didn't answer it. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I sat there, staring at the black screen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 5 seconds later, the voicemail notification appeared. I picked up the phone. My fingers were cold. I pressed play, holding the device to my ear, bracing myself for Ray's anger, for his screaming, for the demands. But it wasn't Ray. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years, a voice that sounded broken, thin, and terrified. Allie Tessa's voice crackled through the static. Allie, please pick up. I know you blocked Dad. I know you hate us, but it is Mom. She collapsed at work. They are taking her to surgery. Dad is losing it. He is trying to sign papers he doesn't understand. Ali, please, we need you. Not for money, just, please tell us what to do. The message ended. I lowered the phone. The office around me was still humming with the quiet sounds of productivity. Keyboards clacking, the coffee machine whirring, the rain hitting the glass. But I wasn't in Boston anymore. I was back in the kitchen with the thin walls, listening to the sound of a family falling apart. My mother was dying, or she was hurt, and Ray was signing papers he didn't understand. That phrase terrified me more than the medical emergency. Ray with a pen in a crisis was a weapon of mass destruction. I looked at my computer screen. The code for the patient portal was waiting for me. If condition A is met, execute command B. Logic, structure, safety. I looked at the phone. Chaos, guilt, the trap. I took a breath. I didn't call back immediately. I opened my Student Shield website. I navigated to the page titled Medical Emergencies and Financial Boundaries. I read my own words. Compassion does not require self-destruction. I looked at the phone number in the voicemail. I knew I couldn't just dive in blindly. A strategist needs data before they act. I took a deep breath, staring at the screen. The storm had made landfall, and I had to decide if I was going to step out of my shelter to face it. I stared at the phone in my hand. The voicemail icon was a small, red dot, but it felt like a bullet hole in the screen. I had not spoken to my sister in 730 days. I had not heard her voice since she was a teenager complaining about homework. Now, her voice was a ghost trapped in a digital recording, begging for help. I did not call back immediately. I spent 10 minutes breathing, in through the nose for 4 seconds, hold for 7, out for 8. It was a technique Dr. Aris taught me to down-regulate the nervous system. My body was screaming danger. Run, hide. It was reacting to the stimulus of the Hartwell family the same way a burn victim reacts to a match being struck. But my mind was different now. My mind was trained. I unlocked the phone. I bypassed the recent call list and dialed Tessa directly. She picked up on the first ring. Ali. Her voice was wet, breathless. Oh my God. You called back. I thought you were going to leave us alone. I thought you didn't care. Stop, I said. My voice was calm, unrecognizable to my own ears. It sounded like my work voice, the voice I used when a server crashed or a client was screaming about a bug. Tell me exactly what is happening with Mom. No stories, no drama, just the medical facts. There was a pause, a sniffing sound. Then Tessa shifted gears. She was still the same Tessa who could pivot from victim to narrator in a heartbeat. It is her heart, she said. Congestive heart failure, but complicated. The doctors found a blockage, a severe one. She collapsed at the store on Tuesday. They have her in the ICU at Mesa General. They want to operate. Ali, they want to do a bypass and a valve replacement. But what I asked. But the insurance, Tessa whispered. Mom's coverage. It is terrible. It is one of those high-deductible plans she bought because the premiums were cheap. The hospital is asking for a deposit before they schedule the non-emergency portion of the surgery. They are saying it is elective until she crashes again. How much, I asked. $20,000. Tessa said. Just to book the room and the team. The total estimate is over $100,000. I closed my eyes. $100,000. In the Hartwell economy. That was an imaginary number. It might as well have been $1 billion. And Dad? I asked. Where is Ray in this equation? He is frantic, Tessa said. She lowered her voice. He is trying to sell the truck. He is calling everyone he knows. He keeps saying he has a deal closing next week that will cover it. But Ali, there is no deal. We both know there is no deal. He's going to sign something bad. He is going to go to one of those predatory lenders again. I felt the old pull, the gravity of the black hole. I could see Ray sweating in the waiting room, signing a lien on a house they barely owned, destroying what little stability they had left in a futile attempt to be the hero. Why did you call me? Tessa, I asked. You know I don't have $100,000. I am 23 years old. I work at a startup. I know, she said quickly. I don't want money. I mean, we need money. But that is not why I called. I called because of what you do. What should I do? You work in health tech, she said. I saw your LinkedIn. I saw the podcast. You build systems for this. You know how the billing codes work. You know how to talk to the administration. You know the loopholes. Ali? You are the only person we know who speaks their language. I gripped the phone tighter. She was right. I spent my days analyzing the architecture of the American healthcare system. I knew exactly which forms to file for charity care. I knew how to negotiate a chargemaster rate down to a Medicare rate. I knew that elective was a fluid term if you knew which doctor to email. They didn't need my wallet. They needed my brain. They needed the Harvard degree Ray had tried to steal. I can't do this from Boston, I said. I need to see the paperwork. I need to see the denial letter, the policy document. And the hospital's financial aid application. Come home, Tessa pleaded. Just for a week. No, I said. The word was a reflex, sharp and instant. I am never setting foot in that house again. I am not coming to Mesa Vista. Then how she asked, her voice cracking. I looked at my calendar. Next week. I was scheduled to fly to Seattle for the Pacific Health Innovation Summit. It was a 3-hour flight from Phoenix. I'm going to be in Seattle on Monday. I said, I have a conference. You and Mom. Can Mom travel? No. She is in the ICU. Tessa said, then you come. I said, you bring everything. Every scrap of paper, every bill, every notice. You bring Mom's insurance card and her social security information. You meet me there. I can't afford a flight to Seattle, Tessa said, her voice small. I will book it, I said. I will email you the boarding pass. 1 ticket, round trip, same day return. There was silence on the line. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking about how cold I sounded. She was thinking about how her little sister had turned into a transaction machine. Okay, she said, I will be there. And Tessa, I added, yeah, if Ray comes with you, I am walking away. If I see his face at the airport, if I see him in the hotel lobby, I get back on a plane to Boston and I block your number forever. Do you understand? I understand, she whispered. I hung up. I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a general who had just agreed to a peace talk in the middle of a minefield. I turned back to my computer. I had work to do. First, I booked the ticket. Phoenix to Seattle. Departing 6 in the morning on Monday. I put it on my personal credit card. $340. I spent it in my mind as consulting costs. Then, I opened my email client. I composed a message to Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a patient advocate I had met through the podcast circuit. She was a woman who had spent 30 years fighting insurance companies. She was the person you called when the system tried to kill you. Subject: urgent consult, uninsured, high deductible, catastrophic case. Sarah, I have a hypothetical situation. 55-year-old female, employed retail, low income, high deductible plan, acute cardiac failure requiring bypass. The hospital is demanding an upfront payment of $20,000. The patient is being flagged as elective. What are the leverage points to force a reclassification to emergency status to bypass the deposit requirement? Need the specific regulatory codes for Arizona. I hit send. That was the help part. Now for the shield part. I opened a new email to the legal department at HarborKite. Specifically, to Marcus Thorne, the company's internal counsel. We had grabbed drinks once at a company mixer, and I knew he was fierce about corporate security. Subject: preemptive alert. Potential impersonation risk. Marcus, due to a family medical emergency, I will be engaging with some external entities. However, I want to formally flag that no family member of mine has authorization to contact HarborKite or speak on my behalf. If you receive any calls from a Ray Hartwell or a Tessa Hartwell claiming to need verification of my employment, income, or requesting an advance on my salary, please deny them immediately and notify me. They may attempt to use the medical crisis to leverage financial access. Sending that email made me feel sick. Most people would be emailing their boss to ask for time off to be with their dying mother. I was emailing a lawyer to make sure my father didn't try to steal my paycheck while my mother was dying. That was the reality of being a Hartwell. The crisis didn't pause the predation. The crisis fueled the predation. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing. I treated it like a final exam. I printed out the Arizona state statutes regarding medical debt. I downloaded the financial aid policy of Mesa General Hospital. I highlighted the sections that applied to households making under $40,000 a year. I was building a weapon. My weapon was paper. On Monday morning, I flew to Seattle. The conference was at a sleek hotel downtown, all glass and steel and rain-streaked windows. I checked in, got my badge, and then found a quiet table in the lobby cafe. I sat with my back to the wall, facing the entrance. I checked my watch. Tessa's flight had landed an hour ago. She should be here any minute. I felt a vibration in my pocket. A text from Sarah, the advocate. Alina, look at EMTALA regulations. If she is unstable, they cannot demand payment before stabilizing her. If the bypass is necessary to prevent immediate death, demanding a deposit is a violation. Also, check if the hospital is a nonprofit. If so, they are legally required to have a charity care program under IRS Section 501R. I smiled grimly. This was the ammunition I needed. I looked up and saw her. Tessa walked through the revolving doors. She looked older than 23. She was wearing a coat that looked too thin for the Seattle dampness, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was dragging a carry-on bag that looked heavy. She scanned the room, her eyes wide and anxious. When she saw me, her shoulders slumped. She walked over, navigating through the crowd of tech professionals in blazers and lanyards. She looked out of place. She looked like a refugee from another world. "Ali," she breathed, stopping at the table. I stood up. I didn't hug her. I wanted to. I wanted to grab her and ask her why she looked so tired, why she looked so thin. But I kept my hands on the table. "Sit down, Tessa," I said. She sat. She pulled the bag onto her lap and zipped it open. It was stuffed with envelopes, crumpled receipts, and manila folders. It smelled like the house, that mixture of stale dust and old paper. "I brought everything," she said. "I didn't even sort it. I was afraid I would leave something out." I reached for the pile. "Let's get to work," I said. For the next 2 hours, we did not talk about our childhood. We did not talk about the night I left. We talked about deductibles. We talked about coinsurance. We talked about the gap between what Ray earned and what Ray spent. I sorted the papers into 3 piles: a medical, financial, and garbage. The financial pile was a horror show. Ray had 3 credit cards maxed out. There was a title loan on the car. There was a notice of default on a personal loan from a company called Quick Cash. "This is worse than I thought," I muttered, looking at a bank statement with a balance of $12. "How is he paying the mortgage?" "He isn't," Tessa said, looking at her hands. "He is in forbearance. He told Mom he fixed it, but he just stopped paying." I felt the anger rising. Hot and white, he was letting the house rot while he played businessman. I picked up the medical pile. I found a denial letter from the insurance company. Procedure 33405 denied. Reason: lack of prior authorization. Deemed non-emergent. I looked at Tessa. "This is the key," I said, tapping the paper. "They are calling it non-emergent because she was stable when she was discharged from the ER the first time. We need to prove that her condition has deteriorated. We need Dr. Evans, is that her cardiologist, to resubmit with a new code. I will write the letter for you. You just need to make him sign it." Tessa watched me, her eyes wide. "You can do that?" "I can do more than that," I said. I pulled out the printout of the hospital's charity care policy. "Look here. Households with income below 200% of the federal poverty line are eligible for 100% forgiveness. But Dad makes more than that," Tessa said. "On paper." "Does he?" I asked. I picked up the tax return from last year. Ray Hartwell declared a net income of $18,000. Tessa blinked. That is all he declared. He writes everything off as a business loss." I said, "For once, his tax fraud is going to help us. According to this, Mom qualifies for full charity care. The $20,000 deposit, it is illegal for them to ask for it if she qualifies." Tessa looked at the papers, then at me. Tears started to well up in her eyes. You just fixed it," she whispered. "Just like that." "I haven't fixed it," I said sharply. "I have given you the tools to fight it. You have to take this back. You have to walk into the billing office. You have to slap this on the desk. You have to say the words, IRS, Section 501R, and EMTALA violation." "Can you do that?" Tessa nodded, wiping her eyes. "I can do it, if you write it down for me." I pulled out my laptop. I started typing a script. While I typed, Tessa watched me. "You look good." "Ali," she said softly, "you look expensive." I paused. I was wearing a blazer I had bought at a thrift store, but it was tailored. My hair was cut sharp. I looked like someone who had control over her life. "I am tired, Tessa," I said, not looking up. I am working 60 hours a week, but you are free, she said. I stopped typing. I looked at her. You could be too, I said. She shook her head. No, someone has to stay. Mom. She can't handle him alone. And now, with the heart thing. She trailed off. I finished the script. I printed it out on the portable printer I traveled with. I handed her the stack of organized documents, clipped and labeled. Here's the plan, I said. Step 1. Submit the charity care application. Step 2. Have Dr. Evans sign the resubmission letter. Step 3. Tell the billing department that you are aware of your rights under the Affordable Care Act. If they push back, you tell them you are filing a complaint with the State Attorney General. Tessa took the papers like they were holy writ. Thank you. Ali, I don't know what we would have done. I stood up. My conference session was starting in 20 minutes. I needed to switch back to being Alina Hartwell. Health tech professional. One more thing. I said. Tessa looked up. Do not tell Ray I did this. I said. You tell him you figured it out. You tell him the hospital social worker helped you. If he knows I helped, he will think the door is open. He will think he can call me for the next disaster, and I need you to know. Tessa, I am not doing this for him. I am doing this for Mom. I know, she said. I promise. I watched her pack the organized folders back into her bag. She looked lighter. The crushing weight of the unknown had been lifted, replaced by a plan. I walked her to the hotel entrance. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a bruised purple. Be safe, Tessa, I said. She hugged me then. It was a quick, fierce hug. She smelled like cheap shampoo and anxiety. I love you. Ali, she whispered. I didn't say it back. I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat. Go catch your flight, I said. I watched her get into a cab. I watched the cab drive away. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. I had saved them. Again. I had used the very skills I had acquired by leaving them to pull them out of the fire. It was a bitter irony. I turned around and walked back into the lobby. I needed a coffee. I needed to prepare for a panel on data interoperability. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Tessa saying she was at the airport. It was from Tessa, but the tone was different. Landed at the airport. Dad called. He asked if I met you. I tried to lie. Ali, I tried, but he knew. He checked the flight manifest or something. He knows you are in Seattle. I stopped walking. A second text bubble appeared. He told me to tell you something. He said, tell Alina she is a good girl. Tell her I knew she would step up. And tell her that next time, she isn't allowed to say no, because once you pay the ransom, you admit you own the hostage. I stared at the screen. Once you pay the ransom, you admit you own the hostage. He didn't see my help as charity. He didn't see it as mercy. He saw it as a transaction. I had paid. I was engaged. I had just confirmed that I still had something to lose. I looked around the busy lobby. Suddenly, the glass walls didn't feel like a modern architectural feature. They felt like a cage. I put the phone in my pocket. My hand was shaking. Just a little. I hadn't just given them a plan. I had given Ray a signal. The game wasn't over. It had just entered a new level. And this time, he knew exactly where my buttons were. The meeting place was a neutral zone, or as neutral as one could get in the scorching heat of Phoenix. I had chosen the lobby of the Hyatt Regency, a space with high ceilings, glass walls, and enough security cameras to make me feel reasonably safe. It was public. It was expensive. It was the kind of place Ray Hartwell liked to be seen in, even if he could not afford a cup of coffee at the bar. I arrived 15 minutes early. I selected a table in the center of the room, far from the exits, and laid out my files. On the left, the medical strategy. On the right, a black folder that I had not opened since I printed its contents in the business center at 4 a.m. My mother and Tessa arrived together. Seeing Dana Hartwell in person was a physical shock that no FaceTime call could have prepared me for. She looked translucent. Her skin, once a warm olive tone, was now the color of old parchment. She walked with a shuffle, leaning heavily on Tessa's arm. Her eyes were darting around the lobby, terrified, as if she expected the hotel staff to ask her to leave. "Alina," she whispered when she saw me. She reached out a trembling hand. I stood up. I took her hand. It felt like dry leaves. "Sit down." "Mom," I said gently. I pulled out the chair for her. Tessa looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smudged. She looked like she had not slept since Seattle. She mouthed the words, "I am sorry," to me, though I was not sure what exactly she was apologizing for yet. "Where is Ray?" I asked, checking my watch. "He is parking the truck," Tessa said. "He wanted to make sure he got a spot in the shade. Of course, his wife was in heart failure. His daughter had flown in to save them, but Ray was worried about the upholstery in his truck. He arrived 10 minutes later. Ray Hartwell walked into the lobby as if he owned the building. He was wearing a polo shirt that was slightly too tight and loafers that had seen better days. But his stride was confident. He scanned the room, spotted us, and put on a wide, performance-ready smile. "There she is," he announced, loud enough for the business travelers at the next table to look up. "The prodigal daughter returns." He moved to hug me. I did not step back, but I did not open my arms. I stood rigid, my hands resting on the table. He bounced off my energetic force field and settled for clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You look good." "Alina," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting at the head of the table. "City life suits you. A little thin, maybe. You need some Arizona sun." I sat down. I looked him in the eye. "We are not here to catch up." "Ray," I said, "we are here because Mom needs surgery, and you have no way to pay for it." Ray waved a hand dismissively. "Money is temporary. Family is forever. We will figure it out. That is why you are here, right? To help us figure it out." I opened the folder on the left. "I have a plan," I said. I laid out the documents I had prepared. "I have spoken to the billing department at Mesa General because of the household income level. Mom qualifies for the Compassionate Care Program. If we file these forms today, they will waive the deposit. They will reclassify the surgery as urgent based on the new EKG results Tessa sent me. We can get her admitted by tomorrow morning." I pointed to the second document. "This is a referral to a state-funded rehabilitation center for post-op care. It is not the Ritz, but the medical outcomes are excellent. And this," I pointed to the third paper, "is a grant application from the American Heart Association for medication coverage." I looked at Mom. "You will get the surgery. Mom, you will get rehab, and it will cost you almost nothing out of pocket." Mom let out a small, wet sob. "Oh, Alina, thank you." I told Ray. I told him you would know what to do. I looked at Ray. I expected relief. I expected a thank you. Instead, his face darkened. He picked up the compassionate care form and looked at it like it was a dirty napkin. "Charity," he spat. "You want us to sign up for charity? It is not charity." "Ray," I said calmly, "it is a safety net. It is what taxes pay for. It is a handout." He snapped. He dropped the paper. "I'm not signing a paper that says I'm destitute. I have a reputation in this town. Alina, I have business partners. If they find out Ray Hartwell is on the government dole, I am finished. You are already finished." I said, "You have 3 maxed-out credit cards and a default notice on the house." He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "That is temporary liquidity," he shouted. "And it is none of your business. Look, you are making this too complicated with all your forms and grants. You have money. You have that fancy job. Just write the check for the deposit. Put it on your credit card. We will pay you back when my deal closes next month." I stared at him. It was always the same. He didn't want a solution. He wanted a transaction that kept his ego intact. "I cannot do that." "Ray," I said. "Cannot or will not," he sneered. "Both." I said, "Alina, please." Mom whispered, Just help him. He is stressed." I looked at my mother. She was dying, and she was still protecting his pride. I closed the medical folder. I moved it to the side. I placed my hand on the black folder. "We need to talk about the deal," I said. "The one you say is closing next month." Ray's eyes flickered. He leaned back, crossing his arms. That is confidential business. Is it? I asked. Because I think it involves me. I opened the black folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of a loan application for a small business line of credit from a fintech company called Swift Capital. The applicant was Hartwell Associates. The guarantor was Alina Marie Hartwell. I slid the paper across the table. The silence that descended on the table was absolute. It was heavy and cold, like a block of ice dropped in the middle of the desert. Mom looked at the paper, confused. Tessa looked at the floor, her shoulders shaking. Ray did not look at the paper. He looked at me, and his eyes were hard, flat stones. "What is this?" he asked, his voice steady. "That is a loan application for $50,000. I said, "It was submitted 3 weeks ago. It uses my name. It uses my social security number. It uses a digital signature that looks remarkably like mine, except the loop on the A is wrong." Ray let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is ridiculous. Probably just a mix-up. Identity theft is rampant these days. Alina, you should be more careful with your data." I pulled out the second sheet. "This is the IP log from the submission." I said, "The application was submitted from a device named Ray iPad Pro. The location was the Wi-Fi network at 742 Palo Verde Drive, your house." I pulled out the third sheet. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "is the email verification. The confirmation code was sent to Tessa. Stair mail. Com." I looked at my sister. Tessa. Tessa did not look up. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Tessa," I said again, sharper this time. "Did you sign my name?" She flinched. She looked at Ray. He was staring at her, his eyes commanding her to be silent, to hold the line. But Tessa was tired. She was 23, terrified, and exhausted from carrying his secrets. "He told me to," she burst out. The words exploded out of her. "He made me do it," Tessa Ray barked. "Shut your mouth." "No," she screamed, grabbing the edge of the table. "I am not going to jail for you." "Dad, you said it was fine. You said Alina owed us. You said she had plenty of credit and she wouldn't even notice." Mom made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked from Ray to Tessa, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ray, is this true?" Ray's face turned a violent shade of red. He pointed a finger at me. "See what you're doing?" he hissed. "You come here, high and mighty, and you tear this family apart. You turn sister against sister." I ignored him. I looked at Tessa. "Did the loan go through?" I asked. "No," she sobbed. "They asked for a video verification. That is why. That is why we needed you to come home. Dad thought if you were here, he could guilt you into verifying it, or trick you into signing the final release." I sat back. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just about the surgery. The surgery was real, yes, but it was also the bait. They needed my physical presence to unlock the fraud they had already initiated. They needed the biometric key, my face, my voice to close the trap. I looked at Ray. He had stopped pretending. The mask of the concerned father had slipped, revealing the desperate, cornered grifter underneath. "You tried to steal $50,000 from me," I said. "While Mom was in the hospital, it was for the family," Ray shouted. People in the lobby turned to stare. A security guard near the elevator took a step forward. "I needed capital to launch the consulting firm. If I get that launched, I can pay for the surgery 10 times over. I was doing this for her." He pointed at Mom. "Don't you dare," I said. My voice was low, but it was shaking with rage. "Don't you dare use her as your shield. You were doing this for your ego. You were doing this because you cannot stand the fact that I succeeded without you." I stood up. I picked up the black folder. "I have everything I need. Ray, the logs, the metadata, Tessa's confession." Ray stood up too. He was big, imposing. He leaned over the table, trying to use his size to intimidate me, just like he did when I was 12. "You walk away with that folder, and you are dead to me," he snarled. "You put your own father in jail?" "Is that what they taught you at Harvard? To be a traitor?" I leaned in. I was not 12 anymore. I was 23. I had survived Boston winters and corporate boardrooms and the silence of an empty dorm room. I am not doing this to punish you. Ray, I said. Then give me the file, he demanded. No, I said. Why, he screamed. Why are you doing this? Is it revenge? Is this your little revenge for the withdrawal thing? I looked him dead in the eye. I looked at the man who had given me life and then tried to consume it. No, I said. It is not revenge. I am doing this so I can live. Because if I don't stop you now, you will never stop eating me alive. You will take my credit, my name, my future, and you will burn it all to keep yourself warm for 5 minutes. I turned to Mom. She was weeping silently, her head bowed. Mom, I said, the medical plan is valid. I will walk you to the hospital right now. I will sit with you while you sign the charity care forms. But he cannot come. He cannot touch the paperwork. Mom looked up. She looked at Ray, standing there with his fists clenched, his face twisted in hate. Then she looked at me, standing with the black folder held against my chest like a shield. For the first time in my life, I saw the fog lift from her eyes. She saw the monster, not the provider, not the visionary, but the parasite. I am going with Alina, she whispered. Ray looked like he had been slapped. Dana. You are choosing her over your husband. I am choosing to live. Ray, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I am choosing to live. She stood up. She wobbled, and Tessa jumped up to support her. We are leaving. Dad, Tessa said, wiping her face. Do not follow us. We walked away. We left him standing in the middle of the hotel lobby, a man with big dreams and empty pockets. Watching his assets walk out the door, I did not look back. I gripped the black folder so hard my knuckles turned white. The ransom had been demanded, but the hostage had escaped, and this time, she took the rest of the prisoners with her. The phone call with the fraud department of Swift Capital did not happen in a courtroom with mahogany benches and a gavel. It happened in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway of the cardiac unit at Mesa General Hospital, while I stared at a vending machine that hummed with a low, electrical buzz. On the other end of the line was a woman named Janice. Her voice was flat, professional, and terrifyingly devoid of emotion. She was the executioner of financial reputations. Ms. Hartwell, Janice said, to clarify for the record, did you, on October 15th, electronically sign a loan agreement for $50,000 utilizing the IP address associated with Hartwell and Associates? I gripped the phone. Through the glass window of the waiting room, I could see my mother sitting in a wheelchair, hooked up to a portable monitor. Tessa was holding her hand. They looked small. They looked fragile. If I said yes, I would be liable for $50,000 I did not have, plus interest. I would save Ray from a felony, but I would shackle myself to his debt for the next 10 years. My credit score, the shield I had built to protect my life, would be cracked. If I said no, the investigation would turn criminal. The bank would go after the person who submitted the application. Ms. Hartwell, Janice prompted. I closed my eyes. I thought about the tuition I had paid myself. I thought about the nights I slept on a mattress on the floor in Boston because I couldn't afford a bed frame. I thought about the withdrawal email. I did not sign that document. I said, my voice was steady. I did not authorize that application. The signature is a forgery. Thank you, Janice said. We will initiate a fraud protocol. The application is denied. We will be forwarding the IP logs and device data to our internal security team for potential referral to law enforcement. Do you wish to file a police report at this time? This was the cliff edge. No, I said, not at this time. I will leave the investigation to your internal team. I hung up. I had not sent the police to his door, but I had not lied to save him. I had simply stepped out of the way and let the consequences find their own target. When I walked back into the waiting room, the air was heavy. My mother looked up at me with eyes that were glassy with sedation and fear. She knew who I had been on the phone with. Alina, she rasped. Her voice was weak, the fluid in her lungs making every breath a struggle. Please, tell me you didn't. Tell me they aren't coming for him. I sat down next to her. I took her hand. It was cold. I told the truth. "Mom," I said, "I told them it wasn't me." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "He could go to jail. Alina, he is your father. I know he did wrong. I know he is foolish. But please, I can't. I can't handle the police right now. If they arrest him while I am in surgery, I will die. I know I will die." It was emotional blackmail, pure and simple. But it was also a biological reality. Her heart was functioning at 20% capacity. Stress was not just an emotion for her right now. It was a physical poison. "I won't file a police report." "Mom," I said, "but the bank knows. What happens between the bank and Ray is out of my hands. I stopped the loan. That is the end of it for me." Just then, the double doors of the waiting room swung open. Ray Hartwell walked in. He must have taken a cab from the hotel. He looked disheveled, sweating in the air-conditioned coolness. His face was flushed, a map of anger and panic. When he saw me sitting next to Mom, his eyes narrowed. "You," he hissed, striding over. He pointed a finger at my face. "You canceled it. I got the email notification. Application denied due to fraud alert." I stood up. I placed my body between him and Mom. "It was a fraud. Ray, I just confirmed it. You little traitor." He spat. "Do you know what you just did? You just put a red flag on my name in the entire banking system. I won't be able to open a checking account, let alone get capital. You destroyed my business before it even started. Your business was a theft." I said. He looked at Mom. He ignored me and leaned over my shoulder to speak to her. "See this? Dana," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, trembling register he used when he wanted to play the victim. "See what your daughter is doing. She is trying to kill me. She is trying to stress you out so you don't make it through the surgery, just to prove a point. She doesn't care if you die. She just cares about her precious credit score." I felt the rage spike in my chest, hot and blinding, but I didn't yell. Yelling was his language. "Stop it," I said. My voice was ice. "You do not get to do this. You do not get to blame your crimes on her health." I pulled a folder from my bag. It wasn't the medical file. It wasn't the evidence file. It was a new document I had drafted in the hotel business center before coming here. "We are going to make a deal." "Ray," I said. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A deal? You just nuked my deal. I am offering a new one, a terms of service for my help." I opened the folder and laid the paper on the small table between the waiting room chairs. "Here is the reality," I said, looking at all three of them. "Mom needs surgery. She needs post-op care. She needs medication. You have $0. You have -$. Ray opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "Shut up and listen. I am willing to step in. I am willing to execute the charity care application I prepared. I am willing to use my professional network to get her into the rehab center. I am even willing to deposit $5,000 into a restricted account for her pharmacy copays and immediate needs." Ray's eyes lit up at the mention of $5,000. I saw the greed flicker behind the anger. "But," I continued, "there are conditions." I tapped the paper. "This is a formal agreement. It states that from this day forward, neither you, Ray, nor you, Tessa, will ever use my name, my social security number, or my identity for any financial purpose. You will not list me as a reference. You will not put me down as an emergency contact unless it is a life-or-death medical event. You will not contact my employer. And," I added, looking directly at Ray, "you will sign a notarized affidavit admitting that the loan application to Swift Capital was an error made by you. To protect me if the bank ever decides to prosecute later. You admit it was a mistake. That keeps you out of jail for now. But it keeps me safe forever." Ray stared at the paper. "You want me to sign a confession? I want you to sign the truth." I said, "And if I don't," he challenged, "then I walk." I said, "I take my $5,000. I take my knowledge of the charity care system. I take my patient advocacy skills, and I fly back to Boston tonight. You can figure out how to pay for a $100,000 heart surgery with a maxed-out credit card and a fraud alert on your record." The room went silent. The only sound was the beeping of Mom's monitor. Tessa stood up. She looked at the paper, then at me. Her face twisted into a scowl. God, Alina, she groaned. You are so cold. Why does everything have to be a contract with you? Why can't you just help because you love us? Why are there always conditions? She stomped her foot. A gesture so childish it was almost tragic. I looked at my sister. I felt a wave of pity. But it did not soften my resolve, because the last time I gave you help without conditions, I said, my voice quiet, you tried to erase my existence. Tessa flinched. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional access to my destruction. I said, I love Mom. That is why I am here. But I will not set myself on fire to keep Ray warm. Not anymore. I took a pen out of my bag. I clicked it. I held it out to Ray. Sign it, I said, or I leave. Ray looked at the pen. He looked at Mom, who was watching him with wide, pleading eyes. Ray, please, she whispered. For me. Just sign it. We need her help. Ray looked back at me. I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was weighing the humiliation of signing against the utility of my help. He was looking for an angle. He was looking for a loophole. But there were no loopholes. I had written the document myself, using the same precise, legalistic language I used for vendor contracts. He snatched the pen from my hand. Fine, he sneered. You win. You get your little victory. I hope it makes you feel big. Alina, I hope you feel like a big shot kicking your family when they are down. He scribbled his signature on the line. It was jagged and angry. I took the paper back. I checked the signature. It was valid. I pulled out a second copy. Tessa, I said, you witness it. Tessa rolled her eyes. But she signed. I put the document in my bag. I zipped it shut. The sound of the zipper was the sound of a border closing. Okay, I said. Now we work. I spent the next 4 hours doing exactly what I promised. I marched into the billing office with Tessa. I presented the charity care application. I cited the tax codes. I bullied a weary administrator until she stamped the approval for the deposit waiver. I called the rehab center and leveraged the name of a doctor I knew in Seattle to get Mom on the waiting list. By 5 p.m, Mom was prepped for surgery. The financial bleeding had stopped. I went into her room to say goodbye before the anesthesia team came. She looked small in the hospital gown. She reached out and took my hand. Alina, she whispered, thank you. I know it was hard. I looked at her. I realized that she loved me, but she was too weak to protect me, and that was a grief I would have to carry. Get well. Mom, I said, the bills are handled. The rehab is booked. You just have to beat the blockage. I will, she said. I walked out of the room. Ray was waiting in the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, chewing on a toothpick. He looked at me, and for a second, the anger was gone, replaced by something far more chilling. It was respect, but not the good kind. It was the respect a predator has for another predator who has bested him. You know, he said, pushing off the wall. You are smarter than I thought. I didn't answer. I kept walking toward the elevator. But you made a mistake, he called out after me. I stopped. I didn't turn around. What mistake, I asked. You think that paper protects you, he said, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. You think because I signed it. I am going to stop. You are my daughter. Alina, you are my investment. You can write all the contracts you want, but you can't divorce your blood. I will always be the reason you are who you are. I turned around then. You are right, Ray. I said, you are the reason I am who I am. You taught me that the world is full of people who want to take everything you have. You taught me to watch the exits. You taught me to keep the receipts. I tapped my bag where the signed affidavit sat, and you taught me that the only person who will save me is me. So thank you. Dad, you finally taught me a lesson I will keep. I stepped into the elevator. His face changed then. The smirk vanished. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear for Mom, not fear of the police, fear of irrelevance. He realized, in that moment, that he hadn't just lost a line of credit, he had lost his audience. He had lost his power to define me. I wasn't the rebellious daughter anymore. I was a stranger with a briefcase, and I had just fired him from the job of being my father. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his face. I leaned back against the metal wall. I was shaking. My legs felt like jelly. But I checked my phone. I checked my bank account. I checked my credit score. Everything was safe. I had paid the bill for the truth. It was expensive, but it was paid in full. The fallout from the affidavit did not take long to materialize. It arrived 48 hours after Mom's surgery, which had been successful, in the form of a conference call from the fraud department of Swift Capital. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. Ray was sitting opposite me, looking like a man who was trying to hold on to a grenade after the pin had been pulled. Tessa was next to him, her eyes swollen, picking at a muffin she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The speakerphone was on low volume, but in the quiet morning air, Janice's voice cut through like a knife. Based on the affidavit provided by Ms. Hartwell and the corroborating IP data, Janice said, "We have concluded that the application was fraudulent. We are closing the file on Alina Hartwell. However, given the admission of unauthorized submission from the residents of Ray and Dana Hartwell, we are obligated to transfer this file to our collections and legal recovery team. We will be seeking immediate repayment of any administrative costs and flagging the signatories for credit blacklist." Ray leaned forward, his voice oozing a desperate charm. "Now, hold on. Janice, this was a family miscommunication, a clerical error. We don't need to use words like fraud. We can settle this internally. Mr. Hartwell." Janice cut him off. "Forging a digital signature is not a clerical error. It is a crime. The only reason we are not forwarding this immediately to the district attorney is that no funds were successfully disbursed. Consider this a warning. Your address and devices are now permanently flagged in our system. Good day." The line went dead. Ray stared at the phone. His face went through a spectrum of colors: red, purple, and finally, a pale, sickly gray. He had lost. The capital he needed for his imaginary business was gone. His credit was nuked, and he had been humiliated in front of his daughters. He looked up at me. The charm was gone. The mask was off. "Are you happy now?" he hissed. "You just blacklisted me. I can't even get a store credit card now. You blacklisted yourself." "Ray," I said calmly, "I just refuse to be the collateral damage." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was crumpled, as if he had been squeezing it in his fist. "I have one way out," he said, smoothing the paper onto the table. "I talked to a buddy of mine who knows a guy at the bank. He said if you sign this, we can retract the fraud claim." He pushed the paper toward me. It was a handwritten letter, drafted by Ray, addressed to the bank. It stated that I, Alina Hartwell, had verbally authorized the loan but had forgotten due to stress, and that I was now accepting full responsibility for the application as a joint venture with my father. I stared at it. It was delusional. It was suicide. "You want me to perjure myself?" I asked. "You want me to tell a federally insured financial institution that I lied about the fraud that would make me liable for the debt? Ray, and it would destroy my own credit history. It saves the family," he shouted. People at the other tables turned to look. He didn't care. He was past the point of performance. He was in survival mode. "If you sign this, the flag goes away. I can try again with a different lender. We can get the money to pay for the house. We can be normal." "Alina, why do you have to be so selfish?" "Selfish," I repeated. "Yes, selfish. You sit there with your Harvard degree and your fancy job, and you watch your father drown. You watched me beg that woman on the phone. Do you have a heart of stone? Did they teach you that in Boston, to hate your own blood?" I looked at him. I looked at the sweat on his forehead, the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't asking for help. He was asking for a sacrifice. He wanted to throw me into the volcano to appease the gods of his own incompetence. I stood up. I picked up the paper. Ray watched me, hope flickering in his eyes. He thought I was going to sign it. He thought that deep down. I was still the little girl who was afraid of him yelling. I ripped the paper in half, then I ripped it again. I dropped the pieces into his lukewarm coffee. I am not selfish. Ray, I said, my voice carrying across the cafeteria, I am surviving, and I am done paying the ransom for a kidnapping that ended 3 years ago. You ungrateful, he sputtered, standing up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. I turned to my mother. She had been wheeled down by a nurse a few minutes ago, sitting quietly near the entrance, listening. She looked frail, her chest bandaged under her gown, but her eyes were clear. She was watching Ray scream at me. She was watching him try to bully me into financial ruin 5 minutes after the bank had confirmed his crime. I walked over to her. I knelt down so I was eye level with her wheelchair. Mom, I said, listen to me very closely. She nodded, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. I am going to help you. I said, but I am doing it my way. I pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. I have set up a direct transfer to Mesa General Hospital for your post-operative medication. I have prepaid the first month of the rehabilitation center. I have spoken to the social worker, and she has helped me set up a restricted account for your personal needs, groceries, utilities, transport. I looked back at Ray, who was standing by the table, shaking with rage. I am not giving Ray a single dime. I said, no cash, no transfers, no co-signing. Every dollar I spend goes directly to a provider. If he tries to access the money, the account freezes automatically. Mom looked at Ray. She looked at the man who had claimed he was doing it all for her, the man who was currently holding a cup of coffee filled with the shredded evidence of his attempted manipulation. He wanted you to sign it, didn't he? She whispered. He wanted you to take the debt. Yes, I said. Why, she asked. Her voice broke. Why would he do that to you? Because he doesn't see me as a person. Mom, I said gently, he sees me as an asset, and you don't ask an asset for permission. You use it until it is empty. Mom closed her eyes. A single sob escaped her throat. It was the sound of 30 years of denial breaking apart. She opened her eyes and looked at Ray. Get out, she said. Ray blinked. What I said, get out, she repeated, her voice gaining strength. Go home, Ray, or go to your imaginary office. I don't care. But don't come near my room. Dana? You are confused, Ray started, taking a step forward. I am not confused, she screamed. The force of it made her cough, clutching her chest. I see you. Ray, finally, I see you. You almost killed me with worry. And now you are trying to kill her future. Get out. The nurse stepped forward, putting a hand on Ray's arm. Sir, you need to leave, now, or I will call security. Ray looked at Mom. He looked at me. He looked at the nurse. He realized he had lost the room. He had lost the audience. He sneered one last time, straightening his polo shirt. Fine, he said. Be that way. See how far you get without a man to lead this family. He turned and walked out. He walked out of the hospital, and effectively, out of our lives. I turned to Tessa. She was still sitting at the table, looking small and terrified. She knew she was next. Tessa, I said, come here. She walked over, her head down. I am not filing a police report against you, I said. She let out a breath, her knees buckling slightly. Oh God, thank you, Ali. But, I continued. My voice was hard. There is a condition. She looked up, afraid of returning. You are going to sign a repayment agreement for the legal fees I incurred to stop this mess. It is symbolic $50 a month. I don't care about the money. I care about the habit. And you are going to enroll in the financial literacy course at the community center. I have already paid the tuition. Tessa blinked. A class? Yes, I said. You need to learn how money works so you stop thinking it is magic that Ray can conjure out of thin air. You need to learn that debt is real. If you miss a class, or if you miss a payment, I will forward the fraud evidence to the police. Do we have a deal? Tessa looked at me. For the first time, she didn't look at me with jealousy or resentment. She looked at me with relief. She realized I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to parent her, because our actual parents never had. We have a deal, she whispered. I spent the next 3 days finalizing everything. I set up the accounts. I met with the doctors. I installed a new security system on Mom's phone so Ray couldn't track her. On the morning of my flight back to Boston, I sat in the airport terminal. I opened my laptop. I had one last email to write. To Ray Hartwell, CC, Marcus Thorne, Legal Counsel, Mesa General Social Services. Subject notice of disengagement and financial severance. Ray, effective immediately. I have severed all financial and administrative ties with you. I have established a direct payment system for Mom's care that you cannot access. Any attempt to impersonate me, access my accounts, or harass me will be met with immediate legal action. I have instructed my lawyer to file a restraining order if you attempt to contact me at my place of employment. You spent 20 years teaching me that family is a business. You were right, and I'm closing this branch due to mismanagement. Do not reply. Alina. I hit send. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a physical sensation of lightness that made me dizzy. I closed the laptop. I boarded the plane. As we took off, climbing over the brown sprawl of Mesa Vista, I looked down. Somewhere in that grid of streets was the house on Palo Verde Drive. Somewhere down there, Ray was probably yelling at a television screen, blaming the government or the banks or his ungrateful daughter for his failures, but I couldn't hear him. I was 30,000 feet in the air. I landed in Boston at 10 o'clock at night. The air was cold and smelled of the ocean. It smelled like freedom. I went back to work the next day. I didn't tell my coworkers about the drama. I just did my job. I built the code. I solved the problems. But something had shifted in me. I realized that my anger, the fuel that had driven me for so long, was changing. It wasn't burning me anymore. It was powering something else. 6 months later, I received a bonus from HarborKite for the successful rollout of the patient portal. It was $5,000. I didn't put it in savings. I didn't buy a car. I opened a new bank account. I named it the Safety Net Fund. I built a simple website. No photos of me. Just text. For the student who has been told they have to choose between their education and their family, for the student who has been told to withdraw to save someone else, here is a microgrant. No repayment, no conditions, just a promise. You are allowed to save yourself first. I funded it with my bonus. It wasn't much. It was enough for maybe 5 students to buy books, or 1 student to pay a deposit on an apartment so they could move out of a toxic house. But it was real. The first application came in a week later. It was from a girl in Ohio. Her father had taken her tuition money to pay for a gambling debt. She needed $500 to keep her enrollment active. I approved the transfer. I sat in my apartment in Boston, watching the snow fall outside. I thought about the withdrawals. I thought about the family plan. I thought about Ray screaming in the cafeteria. He had tried to teach me that I was property. He had tried to teach me that my value was only what I could bleed for him. He was wrong. My value was in my ability to stop the bleeding, not just for myself, but for the girl in Ohio, for the boy in Texas, for the invisible army of kids who were realizing that sometimes the only way to survive your family is to fire them. I looked at the confirmation screen. Transfer complete. This was the choice they never saw coming. I didn't use my success to punish them. I didn't use it to buy their love. I used it to cut the rope. And now, finally, I was the one holding the scissors. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was heavy, but I hope it reminds you that you are never obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if they share your DNA. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe taking a break at work? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas about standing up for yourself, please subscribe to the channel Veronica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and keep your receipts.